Move and get started. No one listens to me here, Alan.
We were already going to be here today. I didn't see you in church. Must have been hiding someplace, huh?
I was hiding.
And he's honest about it.
But now that you notice, right?
At the end, I saw you in the back, though.
I came in late, so I didn't want to.
That's okay, though.
Is that? So I think we'll go ahead and get started. About a month or so ago, let's close. Oh, thank you, Alan. About a month or so ago, I guess it was in September, I received this email and an invitation from two scholars in California, and they are the co-editors of, I want to get it correctly here. They're the co-editors of something that is called scripturalworks.com. It's a podcast, and they asked, and they're both now, one is retired and one is on the cusp of retirement, and they're both scholars, they're both theologians, both studied out there. And they wanted to know if they could interview me for their podcast, because they're starting a series called The 8th Century Prophets. And evidently they must have been doing some research, because of course, as you perhaps know, the title of my PhD dissertation was on the 8th century prophets and social criticism. Most of it, not to be coy, is frankly between you and I, and regardless who hears this later on, is pretty boring stuff. You know, unless you're interested in philology and all of that fancy words that most of us don't use in our everyday lexicon. But they're interested in talking about the 8th century prophets, and gave me a fair sort of latitude to talk about these things. And I thought about it, and I decided to accept their invitation. So I'll be doing this podcast. What I discovered yesterday, and they're very organized, they sent me a 12-page outline, detailed outline of what this is going to be. And they gave it the title, and they had done their research because they provided the data and the biographical stuff. The title, this is their title, Justice or Noise? The 8th century prophets versus holy corruption. That's the title, and it's a great title. It's a great title because there's a fair amount of holy corruption, okay? Where verses are used, texts are cited, crosses are worn, you know, the whole works, right? That tells the whole world, this is who we are. You know, worship happens with the kind of frequency that most of us, frankly, may not have the time for. But I'm talking about the text now, you know, and there is even a touch of sarcasm by Amos the prophet, who the people are involved with such kind of corruption in their lives, but they are worshiping more frequently than ever. Or let me rephrase that. They're finding themselves at a temple more frequently than ever. And Amos says, oh sure, you can come to Bethel, and you can come to Gilgal, and you can come on Sunday, and you can come on Wednesday, and you can give. And it says, for so you love to do. The problem, however, is what? it bears no resemblance to what you actually do. So you find yourself with the kind of frequency that leaves all of us almost in admiration that you could be so righteous, except for one striking problem. It bears no resemblance to what you do. So I don't know what we're going to do with 12 pages of detailed notes. And because they're in California, the time. So I'll be at work, and I've blocked off, and I have on my door and my office something that tells you, you know, I'm in a meeting or whatever. But there's also something on there that says, do not disturb, which I've never used. I'm going to have to use it this time. And I'll tell you how that transpires later on. So as we continue, and we'll finish this, we left off at that very kind of exciting moment, you may recall, right? That the mother-in-law that we all hope for, right? Who says to her daughter-in-law, now a young widow, go down to the threshing floor, let the man eat and drink, and when he is, and I love this, when he is contented, you have no idea what that means, but you know, he's happy, you know, and then go and essentially lift his skirt, right? Now, do not do this in your everyday life. But it's, of course, an expression. It's actually is one of the expressions of a marriage proposal. And she is doing this. This is Ruth. And he will tell you what to do. And it sounds very sort of, you know, very suggestive and so on. But actually, we have a lot of these, as we'll discover in a second, we have a lot of these kind of statements that if you walk away, you're thinking, well, what in the world does that mean? But Naomi says to her, we have a relative, and this is very important. He is one of what? Our nearest kin. He is not your next of kin. Your next of kin is the one who, I know this sounds somewhat crude, but the next of kin is in line here. Okay? So Boaz is a gracious, virtuous, kind, caring man. And everything in the text, in terms of the actions of Boaz, indicate that he is not just saying this, he does this. And that's the thing, he does this. He welcomes Ruth into the fold. And he has a quality that I have to tell you, at least in our larger society, has really taken a beating. He has a quality that in our larger society, in our nation, has become something of a casualty. And that is honesty and truth. The prophet Isaiah once famously said, truth falls or is destroyed in the public square. By the way, you can plug that right out of the 8th century and stick it into today's society, and no one would blink because it's true. Truth falls in the public square. And part of the problem is that if we are not careful, all of the ethical guardrails against the collapse of truth and honesty will be destroyed. And we are right on the precipice of having those guardrails disappear. Because the very folks who should be attentive to the guardrails have become the ones who are dismantling them. So Boaz says, I'm happy to help. But I have to tell you, I'm not your next of kin. And I love it. The idea of the next of kin in Hebrew is the word goel. And this word is used almost 10 times, not quite, in the last 2 chapters of Ruth, right? But you never see it translated in the exact sort of straightforward translation of the word. And the translation of that word is redeemer. That's what the word is. In other words, who will be a redeemer? Who will, frankly, buy you back? Who will take you in? Who will redeem you? And I think I shared this story with you. At the time, it was really not a story. It was just part of the landscape of growing up. And when I was a kid going to school in where, you know, we took the bus home or we rode our bikes. That was just the way our family was. And as a kid, I would walk probably from here to maybe a half a mile. And, you know, we knew the path, a whole bunch of boys, right? And we would cut across this store. They were not happy about that, but, you know, we would cut across this store. And it was called the Auto Supplies. It was one of these stores that sold everything. And it gave us about a minute extra. But every time I walked through there was a door that was frosted over with gold letters. I still remember it vividly. And the letter simply says, Redemption Room. Yeah. Redemption Room. By the way, is this not, I mean, I'd love to just, don't have anything behind the door, just make a glass door that says Redemption Room and have people guess. Redemption Room. Any guesses?
Return things there?
Return things there? Yeah. Actually, it was, what do you call it when you, pick up?
Pick up from layaway or something?
Pawnbrokery. Pawnbrokery. You take your things, of course, at the time, I had no idea what, right? But you take your things and you do what you do with pawnbrokers, and then the time comes, presumably, where you can go back and what? Buy it back, redeem it. Okay? So any one of us who has ever done that, I haven't, because of course I don't own anything of value, but we buy that back. We become the redeemer, if you will. In this case, of course, the redeemer is really an outsider who is about, or maybe is about, to give this new life to Ruth. So here is what happens. And by the way, this is an old idea, which is called levirate marriage, where the redeemer is the levier. We're familiar with this. I know we're familiar with this. We may not think we're familiar with this, but we've inherited this idea, right? For example, at weddings, the guy who stands next to the guy. Okay? This is what we see. And you remember Henry VIII, the man of multiple wives? Who is his first wife? I'm putting you to the test right now. Catherine of Aragon, right. Who was his brother's wife. And his brother died, and they told Hank, as we love to call him, you're it. And he was not a happy camper. But he married Catherine. And as you well know, it became one of several, right? And none of them ended well.
The last one survived.
Last one survived. Levirate marriage. Next of kin. This is what happens. And so Boaz says, I'm not. Let's see. Whoops. So Boaz then says, I want to do the right thing. I mean, think of that statement. It's so quaint, Georgia, isn't it? I want to do the right thing. What, are you living in the 19th century? But Boaz says, I want to do the right thing. And I'm going to find the next of kin. And I'm going to ensure that the next of kin essentially will be in the public square and either accept or not, right? But I will not put myself over that. And so he says, the next of kin, I'm cutting through some of the details. The next of kin comes, right? We don't know who this person is. But there's no name. All we know that he is the Goel. He is the Redeemer. And he comes, and by the way, you have to love Boaz. He's very, very smart. Boaz says, here's the situation. Naomi has returned, and her husband, Elimelech, and her 2 sons have died. And they have this land. And since you are the next of kin, you will inherit this land. And what do you think the next of kin says? Well, this sounds like a great deal. I mean, by the way, what circumstance in our lives where we walk in and someone says, I'm glad you're here. There's $1 million and it's yours. And there are no strings attached, and you're saying, well, thank you very much. And the next of kin says what? Thank you very much. And Boaz, who you must love by now, says, oh, by the way, there's something else. The moment you do this, you also have to marry Ruth. And the next of kin says, whoa, 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 whoa. I can't do that. I mean, it will mess up my, the inheritance of my children. He says, listen, nah, thanks for the offer, but I'm out. Which leaves Boaz. So here's what I want to emphasize here very quickly. He says, the day you acquire, and look at this language, right? Make no mistake about it. The 3 women in this story, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, made decisions about themselves. Now, Orpah early on went back to her mother, but it was her choice. You remember that? Naomi had said, I think you should do this. And both of the daughters-in-law said, no, we're not leaving you. And then she went into this whole scenario as to what would make their life much more difficult. And Orpah says, okay. And Orpah walks to her, gives her a kiss. It's I found it to be a very poignant moment. And Orpah goes back to her mother-in-law. The women in the story make their own decisions. But we will discover at the end, they are still functioning within a patriarchal tradition. Make no mistake about it. So as they say, both things could be right. Both things could be true. And they are. And so look at the language here. Ruth is what? Acquisition. Right? Ruth is acquisition, as in fact the land is acquisition. So even though they're making choices of their own, which in many respects profound, and you're lifting the skirt and telling this guy, essentially, I want to marry you? I mean, you are almost going against what the tradition is, but make no mistake, you still end up within the patriarchal framework. And as the story comes to an end, so Boaz, and again, you can see it here, took Ruth and she became his wife. You notice at the start of the story, when Elimelech went to Moab, maybe it's not fair, but let me refresh your mind. When Elimelech went to Moab, according to the text, he took his wife and his 2 sons. And when the sons died and her husband died, we see the pronoun changes. It was Naomi and her later on. And then by the time we get to an end, we get back to his wife here. Again, a reminder. And when they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Remember the son's name? Hmm? Thank you for playing. But you're in the right room. It's Perez. And it would be 5 generations later, then from Perez all the way down to Obed, who would give rise to whom? To Jesse, who we will be talking about in Advent in a few weeks. And of course, from Jesse comes David. I say this because we don't want to get carried away about the kind of genealogy that we find in the Bible. But let's get carried away for a moment about just genealogy, right? So here comes this outsider. And it's twofold because, of course, Naomi went into, quote, enemy territory. And there are moments when we make a dramatic move that runs against every possible logical common sense, and in this case, almost a sort of a divine mandate to do not go there. But you do because you have to survive, because you're hungry, because you're a refugee. And you go and you hope that, in fact, the society will welcome you, as in fact Moab does. It's a remarkable thing. And then, of course, you return to the land of bread, or the house of bread, where now there is bread, namely Bethlehem, literally, as you know. And they welcome Ruth with open arms. And it is the stranger who becomes 5 generations later the great, 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 great grandmother of King David. It is the stranger. I don't have to tell you this, what refugees might give rise. We know that. And it's not only, and I say this carefully, it's not only, well, that's a very kind of wonderful biblical story. As we take these narratives seriously, they become our narratives. We will hear in the days to come, during Advent, we will hear Mary's Magnificat again. And the meaning of that, after she thanks everyone for being such a lowly maidservant, read the text again and you will see that she launches into social justice for the poor and for the oppressed and for the hungry and for the imprisoned. This is Mary. And the reason that text matters is that we do not allow it to remain as a historical reminiscence. It has to become our text. It has to become our text, or it dies in the public square. It's great to say, wow, that Boaz guy, what a guy. But for all of us, regardless whether we own a field and we welcome the outsider, the story is our story. It's our story. What do we do with the outsider? What do we do with the stranger? What do we do with the one who has nothing? What do we do? And we have not something that is prescriptive, but more descriptive. This is what you do. Yes, you may want to follow the tradition as Boaz does, but at the same time, you want to ensure that this person, albeit somewhat incrementally to begin with, is welcomed into the family. where, as you know, we talked about this a month, 2 months ago, where she will find a home. And a home is more than a house, it's more than a place. Home is about relationships. And she does. And she would give rise to King David. All right, switch gears here a little bit. And the reason I'm including this next text from 1 Samuel, one, I think it's reasonably sort of familiar, maybe not as much as Ruth, but it's somewhat familiar. And it's the text about, again, strangers come to us in different forms. And how do we welcome someone who is an outsider, but by every sort of measure does not look like an outsider? Now, let me give you just a quick example. I read a couple days ago, and I didn't know this person, sadly, that a 24-year-old football player, NFL player, right, committed suicide. A few days before that, playing for the Dallas Cowboys, I think it is, okay, had scored a touchdown, first in his career, and all seemed fine. And literally within days, his life was ended. We can't just decide that here are the prescriptive measures to determine who is a stranger and an outsider. Sometimes the outward does not really tell us the whole story. And so I include this because it also helps us understand that sometimes someone comes to us in the context of a religious institution, a church, a temple, only to be turned away because something seems off. So this is the story of Hannah. And it's a remarkable story. You remember this? So many people who, as they say, campaign in poetry and govern in prose. Famous line out of, this came out of politics. Mario Cuomo famously said this. You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. Some of us speak in poetry, not us in this room, but we speak in poetry, but we live lives of prose. But even if we do, let it at least rhyme a little bit. So here is Hannah's vow. How would you like to come to church and you're weeping, or at least there are signs that you have wept? You look distraught, forlorn, and you come and you're saying to the pastor, to the priest, my heart is broken, and the priest says to you, would you stop making a spectacle of yourself? By the way, we see a little bit of this also. Remember in the book of Acts, these guys are all running around speaking in different languages, and they were told at 9 in the morning what? They were drunk, right? By the way, two things could be true there. Maybe they were drunk, I don't know. But here's the thing, right? Don't make a drunken spectacle of yourself. Seems, come on now, who does this? This is exactly what happened with this. So let me read this to you, section. There was a certain man of Ramathaim, a Zophite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. By the way, you notice again, the men have lineage, right? It's always son of, son of, son of, son of, son of. Occasionally you'll find it's with a woman, but the men have lineage, right? There's legacy here. He had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, the name of the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. By the way, you know, every now and again, you get sort of an introduction, or you get a sort of a thesis statement. I'm going to have you write a novella. That's your assignment now. And that's the opening of the novella. And I want you to write a story. And I want you to write a story that's it. He had 2 wives. One was Hannah, one was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, Hannah had no children. And I want it to be about 20,000 words, and then bring that back to me.
Can we use AI?
I can detect that, by the way. But thank you. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't see an email or someone at my door where there is some kind of academic. By the way, it's a real challenge, I have to tell you, in many ways, and certainly in higher education. Because, of course, what?
Grades. Grades.
Grades, but why would you use AI? It's quick.
It's lazy.
This is.
You're lazy.
Did you say I'm lazy?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad you figured that out. It's very quick, right? By the way, aren't we a nation of instant gratification? Of course we are.
We are now.
I love the AI. It's quick. It might not be accurate.
I would scratch the might, but here is the thing, okay? Whatever it is that it pumps out, it is because of stuff that we have put in. Remember, it does not generate original stuff.
Right.
It's ultimately our stuff. But here's the point, here's the drawback. You lose your voice. It might look fancy, but you lose your voice. You don't have a voice. It's not your vocabulary. It's not part of your lexicon. It's fast. But this is the gist of the story. Now, here's what happens. Now, this man used to go up year by year from his town to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where his 2 sons, Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day that Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters, which means we don't know how many, but clearly she had many children, sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion. Why? Hannah had no children. So whatever we might want to think about Elkanah here, there's a kind, how should we say, at least at this moment, there's a kind of recognition here. And maybe in his world, giving a double portion would take care, would be the panacea of all that ails. We will discover very quickly it's not. But that's what he did. And it says, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And by the way, this is language that is not unique to this story. We saw that, of course, in Genesis. We saw it with Sarah and others elsewhere. Her rival used to provoke her severely to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on. It's interesting, it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used this, pardon me, one wife provoking the other on one basis. I have children and you don't, which makes my life more important and significant, and yours doesn't. And listen, you're provoking her severely. Then Hannah wept and would not eat. And then Elkanah said something that if he had come to me and said, you know, I have this situation here with Hannah, what do you think I should say to her? Let me tell you what I would say to him at that moment. I would say to him, Elkanah, do not say what you're about to say, which I will tell you right now. Okay. Because this is what he says. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? I want to underline 3 things here quickly for us. It's not universally the case, but I would say more often than not it is the case that in times of sadness, in times of grief, in times of brokenheartedness, which, by the way, I don't mean to be presumptuous here, but we all go through. We all do. I'll give you a quick story. Years ago, our older son, his name is Nathan. Nathan was in high school. He was a senior in high school at the time. And I was home. It was a little later in the year, as it is from now, probably in early December or so. And he came home, and I still remember we lived in this old house with a wood fireplace, and the fire was going. And I was in the kitchen, and Nathan came through the back door, and he was very, very upset. He's a senior in high school. He's very upset, and he is right on the edge of tears. And I looked at him, and I said, what's the matter? What's going on? And he could hardly speak. And we walked into the family room, and the fire was going, and he sat down, and he said, Lindsay broke up with me. And he said, I just don't understand that. I just do not understand. You know, right? The world ended right there. And by the way, we could laugh, and probably should, because we know the world didn't end. But in that moment, everything ended. She broke up with me. And we talked. And that was not my moment to say, you know, the things that we would want to say. Well, he's my son. Listen to him. All of us go through this. I don't care if you're a senior in high school and you're heading off to college. It's a strange world in which we live. And I give you this example of something. Some of you know this, and I'm illustrating this because to make a point. How strange a world in which we live. Nathan these days is a pediatric oncologist. He deals with things that, well, you know, right? I have not met, he has never ever told me of a parent who asked him about, where did you get your MD from? They're not interested. They want love and care for their child. Often, you know, a couple years ago he called and we were talking. He said, Dad, is the strangest thing. Lindsay, the girl who broke up with him, is married, and they have a young child now who is so ill. And she reached out to him. Strange world. and
Child was what?
very ill. And of course, Nathan, of course, provided as much as he could. The kind of, I hope, information and guidance. It's a strange world. And we're all brokenhearted, and when we are, maybe it's not universal, but we weep, we can't eat, and we're sad. Welcome to the world of Hannah. She lost her appetite. She is weeping. And by the way, this is not a moment to say, would you just stop weeping? And we so desperately want you to eat. And we so desperately want you to be what would constitute normal. And don't be sad. By the way, these are not mean sentiments. But Hannah was not there. And then Elkanah said something that just reminded me that ultimately, as good a person as he might have been, he also did not get it. And he says to you, why are you so sad? Why do you not eat? Why are you weeping? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Elkanah says to her, you got me. Really? Guys, let me help you out. Don't. I know you want a kid. You got me. By the way, you can multiply that kid 10 times over. You still got me. So Elkanah doesn't get it. By the way, it's interesting. He's not unkind. He just does not get it because he cannot understand. And maybe this is a reminder to us. I have to say, I try my very best never to say, I know how you feel. Because we don't know ultimately. We don't know. A few years ago, a friend of mine gave me this volume. It's a collection of pieces that were written, some of which were as brief as one paragraph and some multiple pages. And they all had one thing in common. It was edited by 2 women at a time in their 30s. And they had one thing in common. Everyone who wrote in that book had lost a child. Whether it was President Eisenhower, who has a piece in there, to the person next door. And the 2 women who wrote it had both lost sons in automobile accidents. And what was striking is that in their preface, they both acknowledged that despite the commonality, they could not fully understand how the other person felt. Because that was their experience. But after they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. By the way, I've often thought that that would be a great name for a young child. Hannah rose. In case you're interested. Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow, and this is always a tricky business. A tricky business. That God, by the way, if it sounds remarkably like a quid pro quo, right? Lord, if you would do this for me, then, the if-then formula. She was deeply distressed, and she made this vow, O Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the misery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant. And every now and again in the Bible, we have those 2 seemingly almost redundant phrases. Remember me and not forget. Remember me and not forget. But will give to your servant a male child, And then I will set before you as a Nazarite until the day of his death. He shall neither drink wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head. If you would only give this to me, I make a vow, this is how I will bring him up. The most well-known Nazarite in the Bible is Samson, right? As she continued praying to the Lord, remember now, she is in the temple. And clearly, this is a statement that suggests, for what it's worth, she could no longer really depend on Elkanah. So sometimes, even in the midst of your weakness, you go and you present yourself. And she does. And she is weeping bitterly before the Lord. As she continued praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. Eli, as you know, is the priest. You go to the temple, to the church, to the place of worship, you are distraught, and you're silently praying. And I look at you, and my first thought is, you must be drunk. Now we can dissect this. Simply because I do not hear you, and more importantly, simply because I'm not listening to you, I will draw the conclusion that you're making a spectacle of yourself. And by the way, this is the place where men gather anyway, you know. And Timothy, God help Timothy, who picks up this, you know, if women have questions and, you know, what should you do? Go home and check in with your husband.
I'm surprised Hannah was allowed in the temple.
She went there quietly.
Snuck in.
Snuck in, no. Snuck in. And how did she pray? Silently. Do not misinterpret silence with the movement of your lips. Do not interpret that as being a drunken spectacle. Do not interpret that as not being able to communicate. She did. And it's remarkable because, of course, we could speak to God not only when voices are heard and the world knows, but in the silence. To totally take that phrase out of context from Simon and Garfunkel, what? In the sound of silence. And where do we find that in the Bible? Once again, it's there. It's there. Elijah was running for his life, and he waited for God to respond to him, to tell him, what am I going to do? The people are trying to kill me. And all of the signs that he had become accustomed to seeing, revealing the presence of God, such as lightning and such as thunder and all of that. And there was no voice. And finally, when God spoke to him, according to the text, it came when? In the still small voice. There is no proper translation from the Hebrew. It could easily be in the sound of silence. And the only way the sound of silence or a still small voice works is, what do we need to do? Listen and take seriously each other. And Eli says, you're making a drunken spectacle of yourself, but and by the way, as if that was not enough. You know, when you're on a roll, what do you need to do? Or are you in a hole? Yeah, you keep digging. Yeah, that never happens in our society, right? And Eli added, put away the wine. Is it not enough to accuse me of being a drunken spectacle? But then you say, I know, put away the wine. There is no wine. But Hannah answered, No, my Lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul to the Lord. I am pouring out my soul. It is the Hebrew concept of that which gives life. Sometimes actually refers to God having a soul. Very challenging idea, for sure. There is a line in the prophets where it says, my soul hates. Imagine, I'm referring to God. Nephesh is the stuff that gives you life, if you will. I've been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I've been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all the time. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, for the God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your sight. Then the woman went her way and ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. What changed? It's not a rhetorical question. What changed?
Was recognized.
Say that again.
She was recognized.
She was recognized for who she is, not who he imagined she was. What else? What changed here?
She felt heard.
She got heard. She got listened to. So let me pose this question. Did she have a baby? No, according to this text, right now? No. Did she give birth? No. Was she pregnant? No. But she was no longer sad. She ate, and she no longer wept. What changed?
Her mindset.
Her mind?
Her mindset.
Her mindset? Her mindset? Her attitude? All right.
She trusted in God.
She trusted in God. On God. But let me pose the question then, and this is going to be vague, so I'll premise what I'm saying by saying to you, this is a vague question. It's open. On a daily basis, particularly in times of challenges, whether it's personal and maybe even private, but also large, what carries us on? What propels us forward? Faith? Hope? Somebody's going to say love now. I mean, by the way, you can't go wrong with these things, right? Desire to serve? What exactly did Eli give to her that caused her to stop?
Did she think that Eli was like speaking for God?
Yes,
Like maybe God
sure, absolutely.
So she believed that God had told her.
Yes. And so when Pastor Dave or Pastor Ted or Pastor Jan stands up there and say, the Lord bless you and keep you. You're speaking on, you become the embodiment at that moment. When the Lord bless you and keep you, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Who is speaking here? Yes, it's the pastor, but granting you the kind of benediction that comes from God. You're not going to be granted peace because Hemchand said, peace be unto you. That's nice. But what she goes away with, and you're all, I think, alluding to this, is what carries us on. And that is promise. Promise. I promise to you. I know it's quaint these days. I give you my word. Yeah, right. I'd like that in triplicate, please. By the way, I give you my word. Yes, I want an email to that effect. But here, Eli says, speaking on behalf of the Lord, I give you my word. The promise. That's what, by the way, that's what leads us into tomorrow. And the next day. And the next day. And the day after that. Promise. Promise. It's a great, if you play around with French long enough, a veclaton, meaning in time, the phrase. It will be fulfilled in time. It's a great phrase, a veclaton, in time. The promise will be fulfilled. But for now, you have the promise. You notice it does not say, by the way, it will be fulfilled tomorrow. Which means that you and I have to sort of incorporate that very difficult quality, which is, of course, patience. But you have the promise. And what we are told, it's not here, but what we are told is that Hannah went home and Elkanah knew his wife. Elkanah knew his wife, and she became pregnant. And that word there, which of course we've inherited today and sometimes use in a kind of a funny throwaway, oh, wink, wink, he knew his wife. Okay? And the Hebrew yada, which by the way is very common, and it's the same word that says, know the Lord, right? It has to do with the kind of profound intimacy that is relational. And Elkanah knew his wife, and she had a son. The miracle of the extraordinary often, if not always, happens in the ordinary. Elkanah knew his wife. How do we generally, for the most part, have children? It is because one person knows the other. That's the way it happens. It's the ordinariness. Here, it's the extraordinary because she could not. And the extraordinary did not just say she went home and before we know it, somehow she became pregnant and we have no idea how that happened. No. It happened in the ordinary. In the ordinary. Did she keep her promise, her vow? Yeah. And she named her son Samuel, which in Hebrew, 2 words, literally means God's name or the name of God. Shem El. El is just a shortened form of Elohim, the name of God. And she dedicated Samuel, who of course will become one of the great pre-8th century prophets in ancient Israel. So when Hannah comes to the temple, I'll wrap it up here quickly. When Hannah comes to the temple, or she is with her husband, and he says, am I not more? You're not listening. Hannah came to you not for you to find a solution, but to listen to my grief. And she goes as an outsider into the temple. And the first thing she is told is, stop drinking. And then she prays. And to the priest's credit, he listens. And on behalf of God, grants her a promise. where the most extraordinary gift is given in the ordinary everyday life, where eating and sleeping and joy returns. All right, we have to stop there. Next time, we're going to head backwards into Exodus to talk about, well, welcoming a stranger. Thanks, everyone.